Story 1. Attention to detail. Quick learner. Microsoft Office. QuickBooks. Sage 50. Payroll. Story 2. Make sure you attach the right file. I once had someone attach his court summons for a driving under the influence charge. The application was denied immediately. Story 3. I once received a resume in the mail that had no telephone number, address, or email. A few days later, he called to ask why he had not received a reply. I asked him to get a copy of his resume so we could review it together and to tell me the address we might have replied to, the phone number, and the email. After a long pause, he said, "Ah, fuck," and hung up. Story 4. One resume I received while managing a head shop listed how much he could bench press and the characters he had played in high school theater. He was in his mid to late 20s. Story 5. I was a writing tutor at the college level for 10 years. We also helped university graduates. I am not making this up. A graduate who had worked teaching English in Japan and in other positions for a few years after earning his degree came in for help updating his resume. He said he had been looking for work for a while with no luck. The profile section at the top of his resume listed accomplishments, including the sentence, "I have climbed Mount Fuji fueled only by Quaaludes and caffeine." He was crestfallen when I told him that although I was duly impressed by this feat, he needed to remove it. Story 6. Nude photos are likely to get your resume discarded because of potential lawsuits. It was hilarious to hear the hotel manager shriek, "Dear God, why?" while reviewing resumes. Your butt was not that impressive. Why did you attach it? Story 7. He made it through the resume screening but almost failed the onboarding paperwork. He was an entry-level position. He was 19, I think. A nice kid with little life experience, but that's how it all starts, right? Emergency contact information. Name mom. Relationship. Good. So if we called your mom and you were hurt, she would care? Story 8. I had one where under education he wrote "suck my dick and get me a job." I stared at the screen for 3 minutes when I read that. Story 9. I received a resume last week that had notes on it such as insert relevant skills here, maybe change font, and fill this space with buzzwords. The same notes appeared on his LinkedIn profile. If you cannot pay attention to the resume you send out, I cannot trust that you will pay attention to anything else. Story 10. An applicant submitted a form with black marker lines redacting all of his information. The only items left were his name, a phone number, and a note that read, "We can discuss these details during my interview." He did not get an interview. Story 11. The only resume I have ever thrown in the proverbial shredder was that of the wife of a friend. I was trying to get her a job at my employer. She had no degree or relevant experience, but we needed a receptionist, and people often move up from those roles into other administrative positions. Furthermore, it was government work with good benefits and many paid holidays. I was doing her a massive favor by giving her a reference and a chance. We had no other applicants. The job was hers to lose, and because she did not know that she brought her a game. She wrote that she might not have a degree but had what engineers do not have, 10 years of experience. She claimed engineers are not very organized and that she could keep them in line. She also wrote that she had better social skills than engineers. I am not paraphrasing. Those are the literal things she wrote when she asked me to review her resume and cover letter before she submitted them online. I reminded her that I am an engineer. She acknowledged that, and I added that the opening was for a receptionist, not an engineering position. She was confident she could move up and become an engineer within a year. That is not realistic in my field because licensing is required and a degree is typically necessary even to qualify for the licensing exam, but she was absolutely sure. I told her that if she submitted it as written she would not be hired because the hiring panel consisted entirely of engineers. She did not listen and submitted it, listing me as a reference. I told my boss I was trying to help someone who was not helping herself. The line "I have what engineers do not have, 10 years of experience" became an office joke for years. Every time someone reached the 10-year mark in their career, colleagues would joke that they could no longer be engineers because of the 10-year limit she had proclaimed. Story 12. This man placed a Tinder bio at the top of his resume, listing his likes and dislikes, and included a headshot of himself holding an axe and looking sweaty. I do information technology work. Story 13. I used to work at a bar. A woman came in with an application saying she was 22 but listed that she had graduated high school that year. I asked a few questions, then asked for her birthday. She was barely 17. Story 14. His mother handed it to me, and he stood quietly beside her, looking like this wasn't his idea. Story 15. 2 we kept for future laughs. Can cook anything related to potatoes. This was followed by the longest list of potato dishes I have ever seen, even though the job did not involve food in any form. Special memberships section listed a Blockbuster card. Story 16. I did not make it past the name line on someone's resume once. We were hiring a chief financial officer, and searching their name online revealed a Securities and Exchange Commission complaint for a 9-figure fraud. At the time, there was not a verdict on the books, but I was not going to wait for one. See you never. Story 17. I was hiring for a laboratory technician position, and a candidate came highly recommended by someone in purchasing. He got a chance at an interview. His resume was not terrible, but there were gaps. He listed his high school graduation date and then an Associate of Arts degree from the local community college about 10 years later. That is okay, but there was no work experience listed for that period either. My lead technician and I conducted the interview. We walked him into a small meeting room and sat down. Before I could introduce us, he pulled a laminated letter from his folio, slammed it onto the table, pushed it across and said, "So when do I start?" The document was a letter of recommendation from his community college physics teacher. It was a glowing assessment of the candidate, which conflicted with my judgment based on his behavior. He did not get the job. Story 18. When I was in high school, I worked in a shoe store at the mall. We received a resume for a sales job that listed under other interests. Special relationship with the one they call Satan. Yes, really. I wanted to interview her just to hear what she would say in person, but my manager vetoed it. Story 19. One applicant wrote on his resume, I am a sex offender who had sex with a child, but I am working on it. I am an attorney and promptly told Human Resources to blacklist that individual for liability purposes. We work in technology with an on-site daycare. There was no chance of hiring him. Story 20. I once received a resume with the worst formatting and grammar. It was clear that the person was a non-native English speaker. I do not usually do this. I recreated her resume, reorganized it, corrected grammar and spelling mistakes, and sent it back to her. I hope she found a job. She was not a good fit based on her resume. Otherwise, I would have given her the benefit of the doubt and at least interviewed her. Story 21. A candidate with food service experience applying for an entry-level call center job listed her daily duties as wept and moped at the end of every shift. I am not going to lie. I hired her and she was fine. I had worked in food service, so I could relate. Story 22. A man put on his resume that he invented the dollar, owned Microsoft, Google, and Ford, was an astronaut, and founded New Zealand. This happened when I managed an Aldi store and he applied for an associate position. He stated on his resume that he could vastly improve our business model with his expertise. I almost brought him in for an interview just for fun, but I could not find the time with the real applicants. Story 23. The life coach received all of their education from sketchy seminars at the Radisson by the airport. They are a so-called boss babe, the chief executive officer of their makeup multi-level marketing company. Story 24. I had an application for a management position at a public library. The job listing specified that a master's in library and information science degree was required. One applicant was attending community college, earning an associate degree in music. Their only management experience was running a Korean pop fan club. Another applicant spelled the library's name incorrectly. Story 25. Reading through this makes me feel very good about my own resume. Story 26. I am sure many of us have made mistakes on our curriculum vitae. I once changed my email address but forgot to change the domain from co.uk to .com, and the interviewer mentioned it at the end of an interview for a job I did not get. The worst I saw was from a woman who wrote Claire instead of Claire. My colleague showed me the application form submitted with the curriculum vitae, where Claire had spelled her own name correctly. Story 27. A candidate opened his cover letter with "Let me introduce myself," and "I am very excited to get to know your company." Yet we had fired him a few weeks earlier from a management position, and he was applying for a different, recently posted job. Story 28. I have never trashed a resume, but twice in my career I had to fire someone during their first week. The first was a customer service representative. The job required a good understanding of Excel, prior experience with QuickBooks at a small business, and fluency in Spanish and English. She claimed she was an Excel expert, had 5 years of QuickBooks experience at her last job, and that Spanish was her first language. I only learned some of that after hiring her. In her first week, she would put Spanish callers on hold and say she was busy, asking other representatives to help. After a couple of days, the other representatives realized she could not speak Spanish, so they started talking about her in Spanish in front of her. She would laugh along as if she understood. During QuickBooks onboarding, our accountant said it was obvious she had never used accounting software. When I showed her the Excel spreadsheets used for order entry, she was shocked by a basic formula that multiplied 3 fields. When I mentioned the VLOOKUP function, she said, "Oh, I didn't know I would need to know programming." She did not need to be a programmer. I was just explaining how the function worked. She started on Monday and was sent packing Friday morning. Any one of those issues alone might have been tolerable, but she had lied about the 3 requirements in the job posting. Sayonara. The second was last year. The private equity firm that owns my company also owns another company on the East Coast. That company suffered a ransomware attack and their information technology team was ineffective, so the private equity firm contracted our information technology team to fly out and help. In addition to remediation, we were there to onboard their new information technology director, make him familiar with the infrastructure we were rebuilding, and set clear expectations for the board. He showed up on his first day at 10:30 a.m. We had been there since 7 a.m. We introduced ourselves, spent 10 minutes explaining which areas of what would become his network we were focusing on, and made it clear we would only be in town 3 more days before flying back to Los Angeles. We told him he was welcome to jump in with any of us so we could show him what we were doing, why it mattered, and how it all connected. He went to his office, shut the door, did not meet anyone else, and spent the rest of the day setting up his email. He left at 3:30 p.m. We stayed until 7 p.m. Went to dinner and worked until 1 a.m. Each night. Remember, the company was in crisis. The next day, he arrived at 10:30 a.m. Went straight to his office, closed the door, and said he needed to finish setting up his email. He had one meeting with the chief executive officer in which he only talked about his hobbies, then left at 2:30 p.m. On the third day, he was fired first thing in the morning. We told him he would have to run the whole operation. We were handing it to him because we had been building it. He had no idea how to operate and maintain it when we left and had wasted 2 of our 4 days doing a task that takes 3 minutes for a level 1 information technology technician. He could have assigned that task to one of his level 1 technicians so he could focus on director responsibilities. The right person for the role would have been in the trenches with us, helping where possible and learning everything. I felt bad because he had quit another high-paying job to take this one. But if you cannot put in effort during your first week when a company is in crisis and contractors are working 16-hour days, you are not the right fit. Story 29. I have seen hundreds of curricula vitae that are templates with the placeholder insert job title here on them. Story 30. Like many companies nowadays, we use blind applications. No mention of age, gender, name, or where an applicant studied is allowed in the portion that goes to evaluators. We attract many applicants from prestigious universities. Some feel compelled to mention their institution in competency answers, as if that matters more than demonstrating suitability for the job. Technically, an application could be discarded for that, although we usually do not unless the candidate is especially difficult. It does not help. One applicant wrote Mensa intelligence quotient in an unrelated response. That application was quickly discarded because it was a red flag that the candidate might be difficult to work with. A personal statement that began with "as a large language model" did not progress far. Story 31. They didn't list a single job. Their only experience was several years of jiu-jitsu. Story 32. This is not a resume, but occasionally someone cold messages me on LinkedIn. When I can, I reply if a student is looking for guidance in my field, take a call and walk them through things they should know. One of those messages began, "Dear Mr. Name, I hope this message finds you in the pink of your health. I am still not fully over that." Story 33. Do not include a photo. I do not need a picture. I am hiring for an office job, not a modeling or acting position. Avoid text speak. Do not write looking for a good career. Use correct spelling and grammar. Do not list fake employers or schools such as School of Hard Knocks or Hustle Industries. And do not use fraudulent titles such as Chief Executive Officer. Story 34. When I worked at a hotel, applicants would cut in front of customers or not care that I was on the phone to ask for an application. About 90% of them also asked for a pen. I always gave them a pen and did not expect it back. Cheap hotel-branded ballpoints. It aggravated me that so many were unprepared. If they were rude, I would write a note on the application. The last thing any of us needed was complaints about rude employees, and they would not get a callback if I made such a note. Something to consider when applying, especially for a customer service job. Be thoughtful and respectful to whoever may be your future coworker. Story 35. A couple of years ago, a young woman applied for an entry-level software engineering job. Her application and resume included a Linktree web address. One coworker evaluating resumes opened the Linktree and found links to a restricted, R-rated Twitter account, a parental guidance suggested, PG-13, Instagram, her OnlyFans account, and content on several other pornography websites. My coworker and our manager were not amused. They debated whether someone was trolling the company or whether it was a bizarre spam attempt. Her resume was rejected and she was sent an automated, "Thank you. Good luck in your search. Please try again in the future" email. A few months later, we advertised another entry-level position and her resume came through again. My manager recognized the name and opened the Linktree a second time to show a coworker. This time the Linktree contained a normal set of professional links. An electronic resume, her LinkedIn profile, several project pages, and a GitHub account. Our best guess is she had accidentally copied and pasted the wrong Linktree web address the first time. She was still rejected for the second position. By then, several employees had seen the explicit material, and our manager decided it would be inappropriate to move her forward to interviews. It is unfortunate. Strong grade point average from a respected computer science program, interesting projects, and demonstrated ability to handle very large workloads. When applying for a job, please do not include links to your nude photos. Aside from a handful of socially awkward software engineers, most of our staff do not want to see them. Note: many people have focused on why we passed her over a second time. Clarifications. 1. There was nothing improper about employees seeing her material. These were not private photos and they were not shared without permission. She had voluntarily posted the material online and included the link in her application. We did not search for it. The manager shared it with other senior employees involved in hiring. Nobody was ogling her. It was a strange mistake to find pornography in an application, and we found it humorous. 2. Ultimately, she made an unprofessional mistake that cost her any chance of an interview. She was not passed over because she performed sex work. Company leadership would not have necessarily held that against her. The equivalent is a candidate arriving for an interview with their fly open and their genitals exposed. Accidental or not, it is unprofessional and can be unforgettable. Such mistakes during hiring will prevent offers. 3. We did not realize she had probably made a mistake with the link until after she applied a second time. After the first application, we were unsure whether it was a prank or spam. Only after the second application did the pieces fit together. 4. First impressions matter. If your first impression includes a link to a preview video of explicit sexual activity, you cannot be surprised that people associate that with you afterward. 5. She would have been blocked once human resources learned of the nude links anyway. Hiring someone after having seen explicit material could create legal exposure. If applicant A sends explicit material and is hired, and applicant B does not send explicit material and is not hired, applicant B would have a strong sex discrimination claim. How could the company prove that it had not preferentially hired applicant A because of the sexual material? Story 36. Someone spelled their name incorrectly. They said they wanted to build a career at XYZ company but applied to ABC company. Story 37. I once saw someone list mom to child actor. She wrote that she homeschooled on set and managed the child schedule and similar tasks. Someone else listed babysitting Daniel. She made him eat his vegetables, among other things. It was cute. My favorite was a man who wrote his attributes in italics on a landscape sheet of paper with a unicorn on a cliff at sunset. He came back to ask for it when he was not hired. Story 38. On more than one occasion, I received a resume from the same person for an entry-level position. The first time it was 5 pages long and listed every job the candidate had held since high school. What stands out is the entry for his job at JCPenney. He described the role as helping customers find stuff. That is technically accurate, but assisting customers with locating merchandise sounds much better on a resume. Story 39. The phrase attention to detail makes me look for mistakes 10 times more than usual. I often find errors that contradict that claim. Tip: leave the phrase out, it never helps and can make you look silly. Story 40. Great with computers, except the resume was sent as a JPEG image. It would have been printed and then shredded. Story 41. I used to screen applications for a restaurant delivery driver position, and the number of applicants who answered no to the question, "Do you have a valid driver's license?" made my job an absolute cakewalk. Story 42. I once wrote in my cover letter that I had ruled France from 1693 to 1702 with an iron fist, invented the letter G, was a world-class Candyland player, and was a unicorn rancher. The job was an information technology position at an advertising company that repeatedly emphasized how creative everyone who worked there was. After listing those claims, I added, "Okay, so maybe I have not done all of those things, but I have relevant technical experience." The next day, I received an email from Human Resources saying it was the best cover letter they had ever received and they would hire me without interviewing me. But they were a Macintosh business and all my experience was on Microsoft Windows. Story 43. Opening statement. I want a job. This was a job placement and school facility for people seeking to improve their English skills. The problem with this individual was that he refused help in building an appropriate North American resume. It is difficult to send a resume like that to clients, many of whom are international and require a strong command of the English language. Story 44. This may come as a surprise to some, but your list of diagnoses and your previous work-related trauma may be a red flag to the company to which you are applying. Story 45. I am not an employer, but my youngest sister asked me to review her first resume. She had written that she was 5 feet 3 inches tall with brown hair and brown eyes, and described herself as funny, charismatic, and someone who loves to cook. I laughed and told her this was not a dating profile. Story 46. My favorite was a woman with a bachelor's degree in accounting. She did not get the interview, but more than 10 years later, I still remember her resume. Story 47. We had a male applicant for the police officer position whose email was maryjane420. He did not progress far in the process. Story 48. The phrase attention to detail is often listed under special skills, but is frequently misspelled as attention to detail. I have seen it misspelled in many ways. Story 49. This happened in the 1980s. One of my grandmother's tenants approached my father to ask if his company, a subsidiary of a Fortune 500 company, had a sales manager position. My father said yes and asked him to send his resume. A few days later, the tenant handed his resume to my father. It was the tenant's business card stapled to an A4-sized blank sheet of paper that is 210 millimeters by 297 millimeters. My father asked, "Is that it?" The tenant said yes. My father folded the paper, went to his car, and threw it in the trash on the way home. Story 50. A long time ago, I knew someone who managed a small store in a shopping mall. Someone once dropped off a job application and, under special skills, wrote "run really fast." I still think about that now and then. Story 51. Under skills. Refuses to work with law enforcement. Okay. Story 52. Any creative interpretations of common jobs, such as delivery and service coordinator instead of pizza delivery driver, or household chief executive officer, chief financial officer, and engineer instead of stay-at-home parent, make resumes hard to read and come across as insincere rather than charming or creative. Story 53. I received a resume that is more than 60 pages. A manifesto consisting of the ramblings of a very disturbed person. I did not shred it. I kept it. Every page is a what the hell catalog about clones, space aliens, references to Mexicans in general without specifics, child kidnapping and alleged clone replacements, conspiracy, corrupt judges, evil police, political and personal vendettas, mind control, lawsuits and countersuits, murder, excessive capitalization, and frequent font changes. It steers completely clear of right versus left politics. Not a single mention of Make America Great Again. Seriously, it is very sad. From what I can piece together, the woman's husband passed away, and sometime after that she had a mental breakdown. The state appears to be trying to step in and help. There are 2 small children involved, and she is fighting tooth and nail. Story 54. I am a lawyer. Multiple pages bother me. Academia can be different, but in practice nothing you need a second page to say is worth the time. Story 55. The best one I received was from either an extremely dedicated troll or someone in the middle of a psychotic break, maybe both. It was 19 pages of the most insane rambling I have ever seen. Highlights include: every sentence ended with an exclamation point. His entire life story starting from the year he was born. A photo gallery with pictures of his cat, his nana, and various scenery. This was not a photography position. A third-party review by one of his purported teachers at the very fake colleges he claimed to have attended. The makings of a dating profile with lists of his favorite movies, music, video games, and more. My coworkers and I laughed hysterically after seeing it. I did not shred it. I printed a copy and should probably have it framed. Story 56. Some time ago, an applicant for an internal information technology position claimed expertise in Lotus SmartSuite. Story 57. I recently saw a resume where, under each job, the reason for leaving was that management was poor and the candidate said they hated the job, sometimes after less than a month. I am sure the candidate is a nice person. Story 58. The number of half-wits who put Brexit voter on their resumes is just weird. Straight in the bin. Story 59. Goal: to obtain employment with another company. Hello, my name is Steve Wonder. Story 60. One of the recruitment platforms we use allows video resumes. One applicant recorded his video shirtless, sitting on his bed in front of a wall full of holes, with a bong on the nightstand. Story 61. We received a resume with the phrase "Good morning, my dear" on the cover letter. Story 62. I received a resume written as if the applicant's dog had applied for the job. I scheduled an interview because I wanted to speak with the applicant, but she continued to speak as if she were her dog. It was quite remarkable. Story 63. Employment history. 2020 to 2023. Domestic terrorist. Story 64. Applying for an entry-level job at a small business while requesting a salary higher than what the owner earns. Story 65. Filling every gap between traditional corporate jobs with spurious claims of having been a consultant. Story 66. I am a recruiter, mostly for accounting and finance roles, and I probably review 10 to 15 resumes a day. Anyone who lists that they are a member of Mensa or who lists their intelligence quotient on their resume is a total tool. I am 20 for 20 on that in my career. Several times I have had candidates say they were looking for a cannabis-friendly work environment. I see many resumes these days where people try to signal their political affiliation with phrases like staunchly conservative and socially progressive. The phrase dog mom or dog dad on a resume means they will use emergency paid time off more often than an actual parent, by at least a factor of 2. A resume submitted as a Microsoft Word document instead of a portable document format document is a bad sign. Overly designed or under-designed resumes are also a bad sign. I see many resumes that are only 2 to 3 short paragraphs of prose in 10-point Arial. People also overdo it with proficiency scales, side panels, multiple text boxes, Many colors, pictures, and animated images. Story 67. I know some people think they are pretty slick, but when I look through resumes, I dislike overused business jargon. Nothing turns me off more than a solid page of word salad that could be summed up in 2 or 3 sentences. It has the feel of a minimum word count essay. Story 68. Relevant experience. Leader of a raid guild in the popular massively multiplayer online game World of Warcraft. Responsible for coordinating the efforts of 25 individuals working toward a common goal and demonstrating leadership and problem-solving skills. Story 69. How would I describe myself? 5 words. Hardworking, alpha male, jackhammer, merciless, insatiable. Story 70. I once stumbled upon a resume that could fit on a sticky note. It had a picture of a truck on it. I threw it in the trash. Story 71. A former friend was a manager at Hardee's. She once received a job application from a woman who listed Lady of the Night as previous work. Story 72. Grammar or spelling issues are a major red flag. Story 73. It was not a resume. It was a list of Alcoholics Anonymous pamphlets and lessons she had read. I wish I were joking. That is what she submitted as her resume. Imagine submitting a list of your favorite books instead of a resume. Story 74. Some resume templates include a bar graph meant to highlight a person's skills. When someone lists organization 70%, communication 90%, customer service 85%, they may think they are impressing an employer, but the employer may wonder why customer service is not 100%. That implies you are saying this is the best you can do and nothing can be done to improve it. Omit those bar graphs. Story 75. Cover letter in all caps. Weird flex, bro. They didn't get the call, laughing out loud. Story 76. I have worked at my company for over 25 years. 3 times we received resumes from people who had previously worked for us and were fired for excessive absences or insubordination. We rejected those applications. They seemed to forget they already worked for us. Story 77. My mother was on the library board of our small-town public library. They were looking for a part-time librarian, 3 days a week. One resume they received was handwritten on notebook paper torn from a spiral-bound notebook, with frayed edges. It read like a junior high school essay. Story 78. Artist using artificial intelligence to generate portfolio images. Deleted and blacklisted. Story 79. I have never thrown out a resume for something egregious, but I will never forget my interview with an underdog candidate. When I asked him what got him interested in that particular role, a corporate information technology position, he shrugged his shoulders and said he did not know it was a job. In the words of Tyra Banks, I was rooting for you, we were all rooting for you. Story 80. The best I ever saw was someone who attached the results of their intelligence quotient test to the resume. Story 81. I interview programmers. I disregard resumes that are about 75% lists of technologies. I want to see what you did to solve a business need, not that you used Amazon Web Services Elastic Compute Cloud, Amazon Simple Storage Service, Amazon Relational Database Service, Amazon Web Services Lambda, Amazon Elastic Load Balancers, Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon Macie, Amazon CloudFormation, HashiCorp Terraform, Node. JS, Node Package Manager, JavaScript, and TypeScript. In my experience, 9 times out of 10, if you pick a random technology from such a list and ask what they actually did with it, the answer is usually that they evaluated it and could learn it if required. Story 82. If you were my ex-boss. Nationality. Non-English. I'm not exaggerating. He gleefully threw applications from people of other nationalities into the bin. Story 83. I once received a resume that had been copied directly from the posted job description, almost word for word. I am still not sure whether it was meant as a joke. Story 84. I work for a hospital that is part of a large national healthcare organization. A man applied to be a pharmacy technician and, under relevant skills, wrote that his father had worked for one of our corporate hospitals and listed his father's accomplishments. His father was not even in pharmacy. We interviewed him anyway because the rest of his resume was decent. He brought in an old hospital pamphlet from the place his father had worked. It contained a short paragraph praising his father's work on a project in the 1990s, and he proudly passed it around for all of us to see. We discarded his resume after he left, and we were all like, what the heck? Story 85. Once I had a job seeker who did not provide a resume or work history. Instead, he gave me a link to his Instagram profile that contained shirtless mirror selfies. We are not that kind of business. Story 86. I'm hoping this job will get me through until something better comes along. Story 87. A director-level applicant at a Fortune 100 company listed an email address on his resume that referenced his favorite cartoon character and sexual act and position. Story 88. Yesterday, I interviewed someone who was clearly stoned and who openly told me he had a habit of not calling or showing up. Story 89. This was more than 20 years ago, but I have never forgotten it. The applicant put his name and address at the top, followed by playboy69@domain.com. Story 90. Education. School of Hard Knocks. Straight to the trash. Story 91. It did not make me toss it, but when I worked for a year as an information technology recruiter, I saw a resume with a fact section that said the candidate had been a backup dancer for Michael Jackson. Story 92. I used to work at a local game store selling board games, tabletop role-playing games, and so on. People would send in resumes that were Dungeons and Dragons character sheets. The owners ran a very professional store and enjoyed those resumes. Story 93. I once had a man who listed 10 jobs over 6 years. Each entry ended with the phrase was well respected and liked, which usually meant he was a huge asshole. Story 94. My father used to give his employees written references. They were printed on embossed corporate letterhead and hand-signed with a fountain pen. Former employees said those references worked well with job applications because most bosses would not make that effort, so it suggested a strong professional relationship. In addition to professional references for new employers, he would also write joke references for staff he liked, with the same presentation. An example read, "We will miss Tina at corporate celebrations. Her organizational abilities, even after 16 shots of absinthe, are truly remarkable, and the fan dance she performed for managerial birthdays will be remembered for years. They were positive and funnier than I can recall, but obviously inappropriate. My father was gay and had very positive relationships with his staff, so the lewd and edgy comments were not indicators of systemic abuse like those associated with Louis C.K. and Harvey Weinstein. This tradition lasted many years and was fondly regarded by staff. People joked that anything inappropriate that happened would become material for their exit reference, until one employee gave a prospective employer the wrong version. Fortunately, the prospective employer interpreted it as a sign of a good relationship with her former boss, and she still got the job. After that, my father started giving funny farewell speeches rather than written joke references. Story 95. Under experience, they wrote various jobs. Nothing specific. No dates or description of duties. Only those 2 words. Story 96. This is not a resume, but I remember when we were doing mock job interviews in speech class in high school. A student walked back into class after their interview and offered a pro tip. Do not use the word butthurt in an interview. Story 97. Perfume. For real. Some women spray perfume on their resume. I have never had a man spray cologne. It was at a law firm, for what it's worth. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.